Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to talk about 10 albums which I think are somewhat overrated as opposed to underrated, my previous video. Thank you for the person who suggested this idea. It's a little bit controversial because this is all subjective, and whenever one sees these polls, like this was a 2006 Q Top 100 albums of all time, they're obviously all spark a lot of debate. In this particular one, Radiohead had the number 1 and 2 albums. This is Rolling Stone from 2012, Top 500. Again, bound to provoke debate. And then the Uncut series, this is the Simon & Garfunkel one. They review every album, and I just noticed a couple of latter-day Paul Simon albums hugely overrated according to the writers of this magazine. For example, this album, So Beautiful, So What, I thought was a bit of a disappointment, and Bud Scopper, who's a journalist I thoroughly respect, was giving every track 4 or 5 stars. So I don't quite understand that. So again, at the end of the day, it's all subjective. These are 10 albums, somewhat overrated. Doesn't mean they're bad albums, just think they've got a bit more praise than they deserve, and this is in chronological order, not ranking. Okay, first one is Tommy, The Who, and sorry to all you Who fans out there who love this album. I've tried to get into it. I find it a bit pretentious. I prefer the fully rounded songs of The Who, particularly from the 60s period, and The Who's next album from 71 I prefer as well. It's not a bad album, it's just a little bit pretentious in my opinion, and John Entwistle made the amusing statement at the time that the album had made them snob rock, the Who snob rock, and become a band that even Jackie Onassis would go and see, so that was a bit of a put down. So I'm not sure if he particularly was that fond of the album. Second one is Ummagumma from 1969 again. This is a double album, and I really find it a struggle to listen to. It's people praise it for its weirdness or its psychedelic nature or whatever, instrumentation, but I just find it tedious, I'm sorry. This is my son's copy, I don't actually own one. And this one is going to upset Paul, Fit to be Tie-Dyed. I'm really sorry because I know this is one of your favourite albums. I've tried over the years to get into it, it just doesn't do it for me. And I know it's pretty highly rated amongst Elton fans. Tiny Dancer is obviously a classic. I can't really get into Leave On, the other famous track from here. All the other tracks, compared to Honky Chateau and what came after, it just doesn't do it for me, I'm sorry. But you know, Elton's come up with his fair share of great albums over the years. Next one is David Bowie from 77. Tends to get praise to the skies along with Low. But I think Low is the better of the two, and this one, apart from the sublime title track, leaves a bit to be desired. And you know, V2 Snyder's quite interesting. It's not a bad album, I just think it's overly praised in my opinion. And this album too, although it was a joy when it first came out, because Bon Scott had died and one wondered if they were going to continue at all. And they came out with the superb comeback, which in retrospect has about half great songs and half weak songs. So the title track, Back in Black, is just brilliant. Hell's Bells is brilliant. Shoot to Thrill, the same. What You Do for Money, Honey, no problem with that. You Shook Me All Night Long, great single. But then you got some stinkers on here, like Shake a Leg, Giving the Dog a Bone. And in particular, Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution, whatever that's supposed to mean. And Let Me Put My Love Into You is very weak lyrically and not much of a song. So this was, when it was good, it was bloody good, but it's not a 5-star album because of the weaker links. That was 1980. From 1982, Thriller, a huge seller, of course. And but I think the legacy of this album is the groundbreaking videos that Michael came up with for Beat It, Billie Jean, and the title track. If you look at the track-by-track listing, it's not that consistent, and it's got the dreadful single with Paul McCartney, Girl Is Mine, with those awful lyrics. So I think that's a little bit overrated. Synchronicity from the Police, don't have it on vinyl. It's their final album before Sting went solo, and it seems to be the most highly regarded according to Rolling Stone anyway. But I prefer their first 4 albums without exception. Outlanders de Moore, Regatta de Blanc, It's only Atom on Data and Ghost in the Machine, I think, are better than Synchronicity, but that's not the commonly held view. So I think, in my opinion, that's overrated. Same with this one, Brothers in Arms. It was the big seller. It had the hits, Money for Nothing, Walk of Life. But for my money, Dire Straits' best work was in their first 3 albums, self-titled, Communique and Making Movies, and then it was a slow decline after that. This has got some good stuff on it, but it's not their best album, in my opinion, and it's overrated. This is going to upset a few people, but I think this has been overly praised over the years by Harrison fans. Obviously, it was a delight to see him back after 5 years, and delight to see him back in the charts. But with hindsight, the production is a bit slick, and I personally don't much like the single Got My Mind Set Anew, and that was a big hit. But I'd rather have a Harrison penned number to listen to than that one. It's got some standout tracks, That's What It Takes, Fish on the Sand, Devil's Radio, but it's not quite as good as people make out, and I don't think it's any better than the rest of his solo catalogue, and it's always put at number 2 or 3 in the list, and I would put it slightly lower. Then finally I've got Steel Wheels from '89, Rolling Stones. Terrible cover, but Dirty Work was not a great cover either. So this was a return after the acrimony of that little split they had when Keith and Mick went solo and they were not talking to each other. So it was good to have them back from that point of view. But if you look at it track by track, it's not particularly strong album. It's got some interesting numbers like Continental Drift, Almost Here You Sigh is a good ballad, Slipping Away from Keith is decent, but it's got an awful lot of run-of-the-mill by numbers rockers. Sad, 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 the opener, is not outstanding at all. Mixed Emotions I find a bit tedious. And Rock in a Hard Place, again, another kind of pretty tedious single. It's not terrible, I just think it was overrated at the time. Maybe now it's not so much overrated, but when it first came out, people were saying, wow. So that was 10 albums which I think a little bit overrated. Then they're all in the family here, in the family collection. Either I own them or my son owns them. One of my sons owns them. So haven't included anything like Radiohead, which I think may be overrated as well. But if that's not in my collection, it's not on the list. So thank you for watching, and just to underline, it's only my opinion, not to be taken seriously. See you next time.